Hello and welcome to our webinar today, our masterclass with Paul from Secure Schools. Morning,
Hi.
Paul.
Morning.
And I'm really delighted to be working with Paul today because actually we wanted someone to do a masterclass on cybersecurity. I've known Paul for a couple of years now, and he is an expert on it. And we just had a chat for half an hour of what he doesn't know about cybersecurity. Well, I don't think we need to. He is the expert. I'm delighted by this masterclass today, and we've been going through what he's going to go through. There's a lot that you're going to be taking down and a lot of information. So we're going to be sharing the slides afterwards, so they will be in our community. You can download them from there. And this is part one of 2 webinars that we're doing on it. In 2 weeks' time, we've got the second part, so join us for that. And if you have any questions, please put them into the chat. And any questions, just put them into chat, and we have them asked at the end of the session. So Paul is from Secure Schools, as he said. I'm sure you're going to give us a little introduction to who you are. I'm going to hand it over to you now, Paul, and share what you like about security for school leaders.
Thank you very much, and for that very nice introduction as well. Yeah, we met a few years ago at BET, didn't we? So yeah, no, certainly I hope I'm a specialist in cybersecurity, but my sort of area really is the human-based part. I'm certainly not a tech person. Again, we have specialists for that, just like in schools we have specialists. So I will try and share my slides, and hopefully it's not death by PowerPoint. I won't be talking about everything that's in the slides, but as you say, you kind of have to put them on your resources so that people can access them. On those slides, there's some links as well to all the guidance and everything that I talk about. So I'll just try and set this up. If you can let me know if it's all working.
Yeah. We have someone saying it's a little bit difficult to hear. Is it better now?
Could it be me?
There's some background feedback. So if I come off, and then hopefully you won't have any feedback from me, Paul.
Okay, thank you. And I will apologise if I look up because we're on multiple screens, but yeah. So yeah, good morning, and thank you, Jonathan, for that introduction, as you said. And inviting me to do a couple of masterclasses for you. So just a little bit about me, just so you know, you understand why you're even listening to me, I suppose. I've spent 20 years in education. Started initially as a TA whilst I was waiting for my GTP teacher training program at the time. I've worked my way through from being a HLTA to a teacher, senior leader, and even acting head on occasion for a couple of days at a time. So I do know the joys and occasionally the headaches of school life all too well. So nowadays, I wear a different hat. I'm as the Senior Cultural Cybersecurity Auditor and Socio-Technical Lead, and that's even a mouthful for me to say. But really, in simple terms, what that means is I spend a lot of time looking at how human beings, especially educationalists, interact with technology and how to get them involved in that sort of thing, and especially around that cybersecurity threat. So I'm going to labour a couple of points, and I was saying earlier that I'm going to apologise for them, but actually I'm not going to apologise for it. I will labour a few points because they are incredibly important. And the first of those is that IT is not cybersecurity, rather, is not just an IT problem. It's a school-wide responsibility. Certainly, senior leaders have a critical role to play in this, just as governors do, and every member of our school community. So I hope that this isn't going to be too dry for you. I am going to come from this from a point of view of, like I say, an ex-educationalist. It won't be full of technical jargon, and if it is, please message to if you need clarification. Well, I'll try to keep it as relevant as possible, certainly school-centric, and hopefully maybe even a little thought-provoking. So I hope you, by the end, you feel a little bit more comfortable with understanding sort of what cybersecurity is, what the risks are, what your responsibilities are as a senior leader. So, as I said, this is cybersecurity for school leaders, key responsibilities, where to start, questions to ask, that sort of thing. And just for your information, and this is why I'd like the slide shared, everything that we talk about, everything that I talk about, Secure Schools talks about, is all led by the DFE guidance, the NCSC guidance, IFSA, and the RPA as well, if you have cybersecurity insurances, even Cyber Essentials Plus, we are accreditors for that as well. So you can be sure that everything I'm talking about actually comes from good sources. So just very quickly, because I don't want to go too far into it, because you can do your own research really about Secure Schools. But just so you know, we were originally set up by ex-educationalists. I'm sort of, or very nearly, one of the originals. I like to say that I am. We were 5 at one stage, and now we're into the 30s and continually growing. So we only work in the field of cybersecurity. We only work in the field of schools for cybersecurity. We offer testing, we also offer training, policies, all of those sorts of things. And as I said before, we're Cyber Essentials accreditors as well. I would like to also add, we're also on the Circle, just as you guys are. We offer free resources and free access to cybersecurity advisors as well. So please feel free to have a look at that and definitely join, say hello. It's quite informal and hopefully informative as well. So today we're going to be looking at, well, you can read the agenda, but hopefully, like I say, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint, but in brief, we'll look at what cybersecurity means to us in schools. Why should we even engage in it or engage with it? After all, isn't this all IT's job? Well, we'll come to that. So we'll look at some of those standards, but again, just an overview. I am more than happy to make sure that the links to all the guidance that I talk about is available to you, but I won't go into detail because we've only got half an hour to 40 minutes or so. Some key questions that you as members of senior leadership should really be able to answer. And again, I'll limit them to 4 or 5 of them. And also some questions that maybe you might want to start asking your IT provider or the actual specialists in this field. We're not, or you guys are not, so every time I say we, you can't take a teacher out of school, I'm afraid. So I still see myself as an educationalist, so I apologise for the we bit, but we're not the specialists, or you guys are not the specialists in IT and cybersecurity. You don't have to be. You just have to have that sort of strategic oversight and that leadership for it. And then what is really close to my heart, that how do you bring the rest of your school community with you? This isn't just your responsibility, like it isn't just IT's responsibility. So it's how do you bring everybody with you? What blockers are there? How can you make this more engaging than maybe you might think? And then finally, just some key takeaways. So if at the end of the day, the only thing you take away is the last 2 slides, then I feel that I've done my job. Like Jonathan says, please ask any questions in the chat, and I'll endeavour to answer them at the end. Okay, so let's get cracking. So what is cybersecurity in brief? So let's start by thinking about what cybersecurity is and why it's such a critical topic for schools. It's like I've said, it's not just an IT issue, it's about protecting our students, our staff, and really our entire school community from harm. Schools hold an enormous amount of sensitive information, students' names, addresses, medical records. There's safeguarding files and even financial information on our parents and our staff. Imagine the impact of this data if this data was stolen, if it was leaked. The identity theft alone, it can cause immense problems. Also, which is again very close to my heart, being level 3 safeguarding trained when I was in school, it is safeguarding at the end of the day. Cybersecurity directly ties in with our safeguarding responsibilities. Again, if a breach occurs, sensitive information about our vulnerable kids, not to mention adults, could fall into the wrong hands. It isn't just a technical failure, it is a safeguarding failure. So, how would we explain to parents or even to Ofsted that we've had that data breach has happened and children's safety has been put at risk? So then there's the operational impact. Cybersecurity doesn't just compromise our data. It can disrupt everything that happens within a school. Imagine teachers not being able to access lesson plans, exam delays even, or even payroll issues or payroll compromises. This essential chaos could last days, last weeks, or even never be fully resolved. There's, I think I mentioned it earlier, there's that reputational thing. Consider, if you would, the long-term impact of that would happen to your trust or your school. Schools, we're those central hubs, those pillars of the community. If parents lose faith in the school's ability to protect their children's data and some safety, then that trust is going to be incredibly hard to rebuild. So I hope it's come across very clearly that cybersecurity isn't just about IT. It's about trust, safety, and keeping the school running smoothly. This is why it's not optional. Basically, it's essential for us as SLT, as governors, as anyone within a school community. We have to make sure that we play our part. So, what is cybersecurity? And I'm only going to do it brief again, and only hopefully just sort of in line with what you might be thinking. When we think of cyber attacks, we often think of that lone hacker or organized criminal gangs, but increasingly we're facing a new kind of threat. State-sponsored cyber attacks. Spoke to Jonathan earlier about this. Actually, these are highly organized, highly well-funded, and extremely sophisticated, and schools are not immune. It's an increasing risk. The frequency and complexity of these state-sponsored attacks have been growing significantly over the years. Nation states often target organizations they perceive as easy to breach. And we know ourselves as people who work in schools that our IT infrastructures and financial allocations to the resources for our IT structures have maybe not been as well funded as possibly they could be. You might be wondering why schools are even targeted. It's not it's often not for financial gain. It's precisely because we handle that sensitive information, and we may well not have those robust cybersecurity systems compared to large corporations, that sort of things. And in fact, according to the National Cybersecurity Centre, the education sector is one of the top targeted. I think it's third now, third most targeted sort of infrastructure of the UK. So we are definitely targeted. But you could ask, what's the motivation behind these attacks? Why are schools targeted? State-sponsored attacks rather often have very clear goals. They're not looking to steal all the money. They're looking to see control, distribution of this valuable information that we hold on schools within our schools. So there's that as well. So as I said, we're attractive targets. Schools are very much seen as easy targets. Limited resources, human training, so that human error, busy teachers and staff. We're educationalists. It's teaching and learning that we're doing. We're not cybersecurity specialists. Outdated systems, and of course, as I've said before, that high value data, student records, safeguarding information, staff details, finance, EHCPs, healthcare records, all of that is in there. So while state-sponsored attacks may seem like something out of a spy movie, it is very, very real. Schools are increasingly being caught out and being caught in that crossfire. So as school leaders, it's critical that we ensure that our schools have necessary defences in place, not just to protect the data, but to safeguard our entire school community. So just a little bit more about what's out there. AI, you unless you're living under a stone, AI, artificial intelligence, it's out there, and it's transforming our world in many, many positive ways, from healthcare to education. But like many technologies, it does have that darker side. Cyber criminals are using AI to make attacks smarter, faster, more dangerous. So we have to be aware of that. There's enhanced attacks now, as you can see there. It's an evolving threat. It's a real risk to schools. phishing, identity theft, exploitation of vulnerabilities. These are all being massively ramped up due to AI. So you know, AI is that double-edged sword. While it can bring some great advancements to education, it can also give cyber criminals those new tools to exploit vulnerabilities within our systems, and ways to get into our systems that we haven't even thought of. So as senior leaders, it's our job to stay ahead of those evolving threats by ensuring that we have the right protections in place, the right training, and the right response plans and action plans in place to sort of mitigate anything should it happen. Or really, you could argue when it might happen. Okay, so I'm not going to, you'll be pleased that I'm not going to go into all of these, but I just put these down as you can see there's a range of attacks, and they're vast. You know, all of these pose a threat to school. I'm not going to go into them all, but it's important to understand that these attacks don't just target systems, they are very much exploiting people. That's why the tools to test awareness that the NCS training, in the NCS training, these sorts of things are critical to raise that awareness in people. So you can see this variety of threats also highlights the importance of treating cybersecurity as a shared responsibility as well. Not one person or one department can be responsible for ensuring that all of these risks are mitigated. Okay, I'll just give you a chance to have a quick look at those. Okay, so I've labelled the point, but, and you'll be pleased to know as SLT as well, that it isn't just an IT issue. So as leaders, it's our role strategically to have that strategic oversight as well. This means that cybersecurity isn't, we need to make sure that, that cybersecurity isn't just a tick box exercise, but it actually becomes integrated and part of our school culture. Because when we're protecting schools, as I've said, we're protecting our communities as well. Cyber criminals know this. They understand that that disrupting schools have that ripple effect. Education is disrupted. There's headlines are made, and pressure is put on local authorities to respond. That's why schools are prime targets. They're not just. It's not just, or very rarely, for financial gain. It's to cause maximum disruption. I've got a quote there. It's Javik Malik, he's very well respected as cybersecurity, best put, attacking schools has a widespread impact on communities. It disrupts education, creates media attention, and puts pressure on our local authorities, and it makes them lucrative targets. It's a well-known fact. So the question is, isn't whether your school's going to be targeted, it's how well prepared that we are when they do, and that is our responsibility as leaders. So, guidance. These are just some of the main guidance, and there will be links on the slides as well. But this is essentially what has happened is in the past, pre-May 2024, it was the wording around what the responsibilities are of schools and leaders within schools and governors within schools was a little bit not quite. It would be nice to have, but the language was very much like that. Since then, those modal verbs have very much changed to being these things should be happening. And if I was a betting man, I would absolutely put money on saying that's going to change to must very shortly. But as you can see on there, you've got you're supposed to have a cybersecurity risk assessment. That the reason for that would be to identify vulnerabilities and help you mitigate mitigation strategies rather. Cybersecurity awareness planning, that kind of cultivates to help cultivate that culture of cybersecurity awareness and proactive behaviours. Robust digital protections, you can read them as well as I can, but all of these things are what the DFE say should be happening, and I would reinterpret that to say aim for 6 to 12 months time, as these are the things that must be happening. Okay. Now I will add now that through my experiences as being a governor for a school, that much of these sorts of things may be in the domain of your trust. So it may be that your trust are doing these things. But I would state now, don't rely on the thoughts that your trust is doing this. It is well worth checking that these things are filtering down. Cybersecurity response planning, for instance, you might have a generic template, but really you should be looking at what you would do if something like this happens. So you need to have a more bespoke sort of versions of trust information policies, planning, that sort of thing. So DfE standards, if you really want to sort of whittle it down to your immediate things, policy development, so formulate and enforce cybersecurity policies that align with those standards. Training initiatives, make sure that you've allocated training resources, have regular cybersecurity training for all staff. Also, the students, it's often in the national curriculum for them, but for all staff, but also all members of the school community. If you, I usually go by, if anyone has a school email address, then they're your school community. So that is your governors, that is your lunchtime supervisors. It could be your catering staff, it could be facility staff. It's not just your teachers. Okay, so those are three things that really, you know, it's immediate action for you guys. Also, as identified, roles of your governors as well as SLT in compliance, you need to have strategic oversight. You need to have all your policies, policy approval. You need to have a system monitoring and evaluation, and incident oversight. So you need to stay informed about any cybersecurity incidents that are happening. It's a very good idea to have weekly or bi-monthly newsletters that go around just stating what the state of play is from a cybersecurity point of view, and especially maybe use that network among the heads among you to share any phishing emails that have arrived or any threats that have occurred to individual schools. It's stated by adhering to these that you need to adhere to these updates. School leaders, you know, can significantly enhance their institutional resilience against cybercrime, and does foster that safer security educational environment. Okay, so please have a look at that DfE guidance. To be fair, it is written relatively accessible. I understood it as a teacher. I understood it, so it is very sort of accessible. Okay. So I know that's a lot to take in, especially at the beginning of your cybersecurity journey, if that's where you are. So building on those responsibilities of SLT, we should look at some of those key requirements that schools need to be, or should be meeting based on the guidance of the DfE guidance and the MCSE guidance. So firstly, data backup and recovery. Now I'm going to add sort of break into my own writing at the moment, but the reason why I've chosen these four is actually these are pillars of the RPA. So the RPA is what most schools have for cybersecurity insurance. There are other cybersecurity insurances out there, obviously, but these are the four things that you must have. So it should have DfE, must have RPA, because if you don't, you might not actually be able to claim if something happens. So these are incredibly important. So firstly, data backup, recovery protocols. This is fundamental. Schools must have a robust system of backing up their critical data, but also test that process of recovery. So you might back it up, but have you ever had to rely on it again? So actually going back and testing those data backups. So imagine if a security incident happened, like a ransomware attack, all your files were encrypted. Without any secure backup, the school could be at risk of losing all that vital information on students, staff, operations, all those sorts of things. So it is essential that backup is not only conducted frequently, but it's also tested and stored. So you need a physical backup, you need one online as well. So you need 3 sets in total. Okay, and again, that's in line with the RPA insurance. So secondly, cybersecurity staff, not staff. When I refer to staff, I mean your school community. So cybersecurity training for all staff is a core requirement. Staff are often the first line of defence. Sometimes they're heard of as the weakest link. I genuinely believe they're the strongest link. Let's face it, if a phishing email has got through the security protocols of technology, that's already failed. So actually we're that last line of defence, aren't we, as well. So attackers commonly use techniques like phishing emails. You might think why, because they're easily spottable, but genuinely 97% of all cybersecurity incidents end up being a person, a human, and very often phishing. And I think the latest statistic that I found last week was 83% of all phishing related risks, so somebody clicking on a phishing email, happened within 10 seconds of actually getting it, seeing it, opening it, clicking it, which basically tells you that they're not really there's not been any time spent looking at it. So there is a big problem around, not around the training, but around just a reactive thing. So training helps take you a certain far. It can equip your staff with that knowledge to recognise suspicious emails, pop-ups, or requests for information, those sorts of things. We effectively strengthen our school human firewall. Training doesn't need to be overly technical. It should be practical, relatable, focusing on those common threats that schools face. And as with all training, you need to be testing that training as well. All the teaching that we do for our children, we test that. We test the quality of teaching, what has been retained. So there does need to be some testing of that, and that's often through phishing simulations. And that's a whole other matter, which I'm sure we'll be able to talk about another time, about ethical phishing. So next, schools need to have that comprehensive cybersecurity policy. Now, it could be something that's filtered down from your trust, but it is an individual policy that schools should have. The policy should be clear, it should be accessible, and it should be aligned with broader school policies on data protection, and as well as safeguarding. It should cover aspects like acceptable use of technology, protocols when reporting incidents, guidance of use of personal devices, that sort of thing. And as SLT, we're responsible for kind of ensuring that those policies are there, are regularly updated, regularly reviewed, and that staff are aware of them, not just handed a document and said, sign here to say you've read. No, actually put something in place to allow the time to read these documents, digest them, and maybe even ask questions later. And lastly, risk assessment and incident response plans. What's going to happen? What can you do if something happens? These should be conducted regularly. And these risk assessments need to understand where your vulnerabilities lie. These assessments help prioritise you to allow allocation of resources and will inform your incident response plan. I am aware that the NCSC and the DfE have some templates that can be used, and I will try and remember to add a link to those as well if they're not already in our link thing, if you don't have any. So an incident response plan should outline who to contact, the steps to contain who to speak to, who to ring, who to communicate to, staff, parents, all relevant authorities, those sorts of things. And again, that's an RPA requirement that you register with the police to actually make sure that somebody else is told as well. So these requirements might seem technical, but they form a practical foundation of a secure schools environment. So as SLT, your role is to ensure that all these elements are in place, and that the school, you feel supported, and you're also, because you are also accountable to your governing body for this as well. Okay, and I think in our next session we'll be talking about those. So moving on. So here are some. If you're going to take anything away, I think this is some of your next learning, I suppose, if you want to put it that way. These are some strategic questions that you as SLT should really be able to answer. Okay, so the first question there is who manages IT within your school, and that might seem obvious, but you need to make sure that you have those contact details as well. Who's responsible for what? your network managers, your IT managers, those sorts of people. Also, there might be a senior member of your teaching staff who is also has oversight on these sorts of things as well. Okay, so understanding who holds what responsibility allows you to be able to direct any questions to wherever you need to be. Okay. So the individuals or team should ideally have very clear outlines for communication channels. One of the reasons for knowing this is, again, should something happen, these people need to be protected and bubbled almost to make sure that they can deal with the incident that's happened, and somebody within the school and on the leadership team can be a buffer for that. Okay, second question about identifying those digital assets, which is about as technical as I get, but basically what that means is what are the school's crown jewels? So what systems are in, that you have that if were compromised would cause the maximum disruption for you? For many schools, this would be things like your MIS system, where you get your registers and hold your sensitive data on your kids. They might include your medical records, safeguarding information, that type of thing. So it might also cover your communications with parents. Perhaps not so much for secondary, but certainly for primary, you do need to have access to contact information for your parents. A lot of schools are going paperless, which means if your systems are down, do you have access to that sort of data? If you had to close your school, can you actually contact your parents? So it could be that, it could be your email systems, your web portal, all of these learning platforms, all of these things are essential. So have these been identified? Have you got all those contact details of who's responsible for what with regards to all of those things? Next, you should inquire about whether or not you should whether you've got a cybersecurity incident response plan in place. A well-prepared school should have that clear plan. It should outline the steps to be taken should there be a cybersecurity incident. This plan should cover immediate actions, communication strategies, pathways for recovery, that sort of thing. For an example, if a ransomware attack locked the school out of all the systems, what plan would be in place for the staff and the parents to be informed? How does the school intend to restore operations? See this as, I like to describe it as your grab bag. So systems are down, I've got all my information to hand, who, what, where, when, why, what do we need to do now, who's responsible for what, those sorts of things. And finally, we need to know about that sort of frequency of policy reviews and updates. Something close to my heart is actually how do you make sure that those updates and those policies are actually recognised by your staff as well, but and again, maybe for another time. So cyber threats are constantly evolving. So it's critical that the school's cybersecurity policies don't remain static, okay? Ask if a cybersecurity is a routine item on your leadership agendas. Is it there? Is it on your local governing body agenda item? It should be. If it's not, is there a? You might need to know if there is a cybersecurity governor who has oversight for cybersecurity. If there isn't, there should be. All shoulds at the moment. Just remember that. Essentially, make sure policies are reviewed, signed off, and are actually accessible as well to staff. So by sort of being able to answer these questions, we're supporting the school, we're supporting our governors, we're supporting our staff in building that robust systems and framework in place to ensure that the school is well prepared should something actually happen. Okay, I feel like I'm rushing now, but let's move on. So going back to, you don't have to be the specialist. You're not a cybersecurity specialist. It's all about that teaching and learning. So shifting focus slightly, these are maybe questions that you might want to look into asking your IT support teams, okay? These should help you as senior leaders to understand some of those more technical aspects of the school's cybersecurity posture, okay? So again, these questions don't require you to be technical, but it allows us to check that those foundational cybersecurity measures are actually in place. So, access control measures, who has access to what. This might include things like multi-factor or two-factor authentications, those codes that are sent to your phones. That adds that extra layer of security, restrictions on accessing various parts of your network. For an example, only certain members of staff need to access certain parts of your MIS system. So just to ensure that you don't a member of I don't know a teacher of year 1 doesn't need to have access to any SATs information, those sorts of things. So SATs as in year 6 SATs, those sorts of things. You might want to ask about cybersecurity protocols for your vendors, people who you deal with outside of the school. I think the data backup and frequency of testing I've already spoken about, but you might want to, if you're unaware of those, you might want to ask them. And then staff cybersecurity training, which again we've already talked about. The cybersecurity training, maybe little and often, is the way to go, but from a DFE perspective, the least you should have is the NCSC training, so the National Cybersecurity Centre training. It's about a 35-minute video. It's just a video to watch, that's all it is. But at the very minimum, and again from an RPA point of view, you need to make sure that you have at least that. You may have more, but at least be doing it. Okay. So my favourite subject, unfortunately, for some people, you're not alone. Whereas in the past, a lot of people think that cybersecurity is IT's domain. It's not. If we treat it as cybersecurity is safeguarding. Safeguarding is ingrained in our bones as educationalists. GDPR has been very positive from a point of view of, again, kind of empowering individuals to actually acknowledge when an error has been made and actually report it. Many people have had to report themselves, including myself, over COVID for maybe accidentally breaking a GDPR rule. So from that point of view, the cybersecurity becoming part of an ingrained culture is what we need to be doing. It's not the responsibility of IT, it's not the responsibility of SLT, it's not the responsibility of governors, it's the responsibility of the entire school community, because it will affect the school community. So, as I've said here, it's that shared commitment to everybody, and it's about making the cybersecurity part of that DNA, part of that safe, just like safeguarding has become. It's not something that people think about as and when there's a problem. It's an ongoing, consistent priority that's integrated into our everyday routines. Again, just like safeguarding. Okay, so why is it important? Well, it's all well and good, all your training and all your testing, but it actually reduces risk. When staff become more vigilant, they can catch themselves and stop threats early. For instance, spotting a phish, spotting a phish email and reporting it. It becomes less of a clicking thing. It's about it's reducing. Everybody can identify a phish. Given the time, but if it becomes habitual, then you actually can do that much quicker. And as I said before, 83% of all phishing emails, legitimate ones, do actually get pressed within 10 seconds. So raising an awareness that is integral actually helps reduce that. It actually encourages proactive reporting. In a strong cybersecurity culture, people feel more empowered to report things or suspicious activity. And again, without a fear of being blamed for anything. So for example, if a staff member realizes they've maybe accidentally clicked on something that maybe they shouldn't, they do need to feel empowered and confident in reporting those errors. The quicker, the better is a rule of thumb. And as I've said in the past, previously, it's often not about if, it's more about when. So they need to know that you can report something, whistleblow or whatever you want to call it, but they're not going to be punished for it. Okay, and it also builds that confidence in technology. When cybersecurity is part of our actual culture, staff and actual students do feel more confident in the use of technology. They know that there are systems in place that are protecting them, protecting their data, and they are comfortable in that knowledge. So leadership, well, leadership set the tone. You might argue that it starts from the governance, but it's certainly, as leadership within the school, we have to be seen to drive this culture forward. So your visible commitment to cybersecurity really does set that tone. If you're actively talking about it, demonstrating those good practices, making it a priority in your communications, your staff will follow your lead. Again, just as an example, imagine you're regularly discussing cybersecurity in your staff meetings, or sharing simple reminders in staff briefings and email briefings. That visibility does reinforce that importance of cybersecurity, just the same as safeguarding, and encourages others to take it seriously, just like you do. Leading by example is one of the most powerful tools that we actually have. Okay, so yeah, long-term benefits, absolutely long-term. Strong cybersecurity doesn't just protect your school today; it's long-term success. Okay, as we mentioned earlier, threats are getting more advanced, schools are being more and more targeted, so we need to make it sustainable. Cybersecurity initiatives are much more likely to continue if you actually build that culture in there. Much more likely to hit regulations like your GDPR. And also it's reputational building. Parents and your wider community will see that the school is taking it seriously, that they're protecting that data that they hold on them. This can build that trust and actually enhance reputation. Okay, so in the long run, cybersecurity cultural awareness increases your school's resilience, safety and success when combating cybersecurity incidents. Okay. So how do you go about that? So I will just quickly run through this, how do you ensure that it's on everyone's radar? Because again, it's not just you. So engaging through training. Don't just email out your training and say, everybody get this done. Actually talk to your staff about why you're implementing this training, why it's important. Emphasize that safeguarding word, because we know how that raises that awareness and that alarm to take these things seriously. Please make sure that you sort of emphasize that in the real world, in the real human being outside of school. You need to know this as well, so it does affect you personally as well as from the school. Interactive is best, real world scenarios, those sorts of things. Visible reminders, have those posters up, have those email communications, just raising that, share it with other staff, with other heads in your groups. As I said, display them. I think 95% of breaches, that's actually gone up to 97 now, are caused by human error. So keeping that awareness up there. Embed it in daily routines. Safeguarding is now, GDPR is now. Encouraging those regular password updates, getting that multi-factor authentications in there, encouraging the reporting of suspicious activity, emails, etc., those sorts of things, having that all there. And then making sure that staff, do feel empowered. That is key. Staff need to feel that their actions do make a difference, that they're not going to be blamed for something, even if they do make that honest mistake. Reward proactive behaviour. That goes a long way. Most phishing simulations have some data in there, used ethically and used positively, that can actually help raise that awareness as well. And maybe it's a little bit of competition as well between departments, see how people react to those phishing simulations. Creating that no blame reporting process is critical. I was saying earlier that actually fear of reporting has dramatically improved over the last 3 years of doing these audits. In the past, there was very much a fear about how somebody would be treated if they didn't make a mistake, whereas now, thankfully, it's and again, I think it's down to that GDPR. People are positive when saying they've made a mistake, because they know that they're doing the right thing even though they've done something wrong. So ultimately, cybersecurity again is everyone's responsibility. Empowering your staff, letting them turn their potential weak points or errors that they've done into a positive is a way forward. So nearing the end, but I do think we do need to think about why people might be reluctant to engage in this sort of thing. You know, there are a lot of blockers, and reasons why people have genuine reasons why people might fear all of this new sort of pushing IT security onto an individual. You know, there is a lot of fear. You know, many work colleagues very much do worry about making mistakes. You know, they might think, what if I click on a link? What if I do something wrong? Am I going to be the one responsible for bringing the whole system down? That fear could prevent engagement. But even sort of more importantly, it might actually delay or stop an actual reporting of something that happens. So there is a genuine fear from staff that this is yet another thing that they're going to be held responsible for. Overload as educationalists, I said earlier, I think that you know, we're teaching and learning. It's not, we're not cybersecurity specialists. It's not our job role. But educators are, and staff and in general are already juggling a lot. You know, teaching, admin work, managing students, all of that sort of things. Adding cybersecurity into that mix can feel like you know, workload and yet another task. It's often seen as a burden, and if it is, it's unlikely to be embraced. So that has to be looked at. Complexity. I think it's fair to say that most people think that cybersecurity is full of technical jargon, that it's unfamiliar, that, you know, don't open that Pandora's box of new learning about cybersecurity. Really, we only need to do our bit. Okay, and then relevance. It's not relevant to me, is it? That's somebody else's job. I don't have to deal with this, but the segregate work from home, everyone has to deal with this, from personal life as well as school. School just ups that ante with having all that priceless, really, data that we hold. So those are some of those blockers or reluctancies rather. So those are things that you will need to consider and might be specific to your staff cohort, so who you have. Okay, and again, the consequence of those reluctances, you know, can very much cause extra risk for a school, inconsistencies with adherence to policies, those sorts of things, password sharing, password policies, all of those things can increase that vulnerability of a human error. Okay, so key takeaways. Said right at the beginning, these last two slides, these really are those key takeaways, and I'm not going to go through them again for you, but essentially, you know, cybersecurity is that team effort. Our leadership, or your leadership rather, matters in these things. You know, empower your staff, get them all on board, help build that. Some people don't like the phrase, but I do, that human firewall part of it. You know, we are. I genuinely believe we're the first and last line of defence when it comes to cybersecurity, with technology sat in that middle. You need to sustain that cybersecurity culture, just to make sure that, you know, your efforts now aren't wasted in the future. And then lastly, just some helpful guidance on how to create that cybersecurity culture in your school. Once you've got that culture in place, life is going to be so much easier. And from that point of view, if there is, we do have a segment within our circle community for, you know, how to create this cybersecurity culture and how to help. And if you have any questions, or you have any blockers, or you have any sort of things that worked, even bring your own experiences to it, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to get your input from there. So yeah, that's it from me. I feel like I have talked a lot, and I apologise if I have. But is there any questions while I stop my sharing? Oh, can't hear you, John. You're on mute.
I need a mug. I'm on mute. You've got one of them. Anyway, wow, that was so good. Thank you very much, Paul. You've done. It's a good insight into what we need to do for cybersecurity. This is part one. and we got part 2 in a couple of weeks' time that we're going to go into more of the implementation and the checking of that. So, and all the PowerPoint slides with all the notes and things we're going to be putting. We're going to be putting underneath the in the circle, so you can access that as well. Paul, we had one question I'll go through, and then I'm looking for some information regarding availability of training packs focused on cybersecurity CPD for staff members. Is there any guidance or any recommendations that you would greatly appreciate?
So I'm going to be very selfish here in my answer. There are actually plenty of. It is quite literally a Google away, but I would personally say, if you're looking at staff training, then so I said I was an ex-teacher. When I arrived at Secure Schools have a number of training, areas that cover all of the DFE guidance, and that has been rewritten by myself, so you can blame me, into a language that is far more accessible. When there's a scenario involved, it's school based. I am very I push for making sure that we're absolutely sort of educationally centric, relevant to, and short as well. We cover all the DFE guidance for training in our training packages. What I would say is that whatever training package you choose, whatever that might be, you do need to have a system in place to make sure that you know who has done all your training, how well they've done, because if that information hasn't gone in, really you need to have access to that training again, perhaps. Relevance, and engaging, I suppose. And also you need to, according to the guidance, you do need to make sure that it happens annually. So have you got a record of that training? The RPA, and I know I go on about the RPA, but that's what most people have for insurance-wise. The RPA state that you should have every member of your school community has had training, and it's annual, and you can prove it if there's an incident. So as long as you're training, Secure Schools obviously do cover all of that. And if people wanted to have a look at that, I'm happy to pass your information on to our lovely Chantal with no pressure whatsoever. To have a look at it and see what you think. I do know that even on our community boards, there's information about that as well. But I would just make sure that it's annual, relevant, and trackable, because then you make sure that you cover those sort of pillars of your RPA.
That's brilliant and actually spot on. Where can people find more information about Secure Schools then?
Okay, so if you're going to put our slides on, all that information's there. Sort of access. The community is free, just like we're on the circle with you guys. So all that information is there. We have a load of resources that are all free. As I said right at the start, we were originally set up to be digital safeguarders. You know, it is from a safeguarding avenue. We can't hoard all of this information. You know, all our resources and information are free. You do have to register, but it's all free. There's a cybersecurity handbook, which is absolutely great. It's been updated. That has checklists of everything that you need to do so if you wanted to make sure you were compliant with the DFE, there's a page for that. The RPA, there's a page for that. So there's some really good checklists, and even checklists for your governors as well, for SLT. There's posters. There's all sorts of that.
Someone just asked the question about the session 2. If you go to our community, the session 2 information is in the community, and there'll be a newsletter on Friday with all the updates of when it is and how you can access it as well. I will try and quickly do a link to it, and I'll put it in the message in a couple of minutes. So,
I'm not sure if I'm overstepping, John, but if people do have a look at that and register, are they able to ask pre-questions or ask for any specific things to maybe be included? Because I'm happy to do that.
They can do, yeah. We have a section of the questions underneath it, so we can do that. I'm just sharing the link now in the community. So then access the second session. And yeah, thank you very much, Paul. That was such an insightful webinar that we had, and thank you for sharing all your knowledge. Yeah,
You're welcome.
And for everyone to come in, join us for the second part of this cybersecurity one, and we'll put all this in the community with all the notes later on today, so it'll be there this evening so everyone can watch it. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you again, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you.